Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Brilliantly Resilient Live. We have a guest today who I am just meeting, but feel like I know her because I met her, air quotes here, through a LinkedIn post that she wrote. Melanie Bradshaw is a registered nurse and has had a year like no one can believe or should ever have had. But through that entire thing, she exhibited so many of the brilliantly resilient things that we talk about that we wanted to have her on the show. So, Melanie, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. So glad to be here.
You, as I said, I met you or came across you through LinkedIn, through a post that an organization called the Female Lead shared and reran. And I'm just going to mention a little bit of what you went through. In 2021, you were an ER nurse taking care of COVID patients. You were in a major auto accident. You took care of your 85-year-old father who was positive for COVID. I'll let you get into that story yourself. Changed jobs and then were diagnosed with breast cancer. And your attitude was 2021 was tough, but I was tougher. And I was like, I needed a drink after I read that post.
You and me both.
What a year. So take us through what happened there and certainly then how you managed to survive these sucker punches.
So, I will tell you, I have had rough years before, probably as everybody has, but I've never had a year where it was just hit after hit after hit after hit. And it started off, in 2020, I had been working in the ER, taking care of COVID patients, like you said, and hadn't seen my family in a year and was really nervous about, bringing COVID home. And so I didn't want to get around anybody. I did what you've probably heard other people do, take my scrubs off, in the garage, and was really, really careful. So when January of 2021 came around, we decided to rent a cabin about 6 hours away, and just our little, family that we knew were all healthy. We're going to go and finally celebrate Christmas. And about 2 hours outside of my hometown on our way, I was rear-ended by an oversized pickup truck at a red light, and he was texting, and I had less than 1,000 miles on this new SUV.
Oh,
And so we had all of our luggage and our presents in the back. And I just thought, you've got to be kidding me. I needed this so badly. So obviously the back door, was crunched in, but I said, is it drivable? Everybody was fine, thank goodness. And I said, is it drivable? Because nothing is stopping me. We are going forward. I need this. So I got insurance information, and I just made phone calls, on the way, and we kept going. And so we had our trip, came home, took the vehicle to the shop. I ended up not being able to get it back for 4 months because we weren't being able to get parts from Asia.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, in my little rental car, which was fine, went back to work and got my second dose of the Pfizer COVID vaccine on January the 8th. And about a week later, my mom, who I had not seen, again, I knew I was being exposed, did not want to expose my parents, tested positive and was admitted to the hospital. And so my dad was left at home, and he, at the time, here in the Houston hospitals, they were not allowing visitors if you had, COVID, if you were in an isolated unit. And so my dad said, I don't want to go to a hospital just to die alone. I would rather die at home. And he was of sound mind, and my sister's also a nurse, and we decided to honor his wishes. And so we were taking care of him at home.
now, let me interrupt here for a minute, if you don't mind. Was he ill, or was this from COVID?
So he had previous heart attacks. He had stents and he had some pulmonary fibrosis, which we're not sure, where he got, and he was diabetic. And so I knew that if he ever got this, that it was going to take him.
Mm.
And he knew that as well. And so when he tested positive, he said, I just want to die at home. And my sister and I, as hard as it was, we wanted to honor his wishes. We've taken care of numerous patients over the years, and we strongly believe in, dying with dignity and, being advocates for our patient. And so here our dad was our patient. A week into caring for him, and I was wearing all my PPE. I had on my N95 and I had on my gown and, my safety glasses and gloves. A week later, which was 2 weeks after my second dose, I tested positive for COVID. And not feeling well myself, I said, Dad, I can't continue to take care of you. We need to get you to a hospital. It's the best, thing that we can do for you. And at this point, his oxygen levels were down in the low 80s, and he didn't have the strength to stand on his own. So we get Dad admitted, and I hugged him for what I knew would be the last time. Went home, went into quarantine upstairs, praying that I wouldn't get my family, my husband and my adult son sick. And I began planning a funeral for my father. I knew that, he wasn't going to be discharged. And sure enough, unfortunately, 2 weeks later, he did succumb to COVID.
Was your mom in the hospital still at that point?
My mom was discharged the same day that Dad was admitted.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, it was really rough. And so she was continuing her recovery at home on oxygen, dealing with this. And so Dad was an Army vet and wanted to be buried at the National Cemetery. And we had scheduled that date for February 16th. And a very odd thing happened on February the 16th. The city of Houston got the coldest temperatures that we had ever received. And the city literally froze. And it was not safe to be on the roads. We're not prepared for that kind of weather, and we don't have chains. And the National Cemetery, for the first time ever in history, closed. And the funeral home said, I'm sorry, it's too dangerous. And we didn't want any of our friends or family, to risk anything. And so we had to postpone that again. And I really needed to put him to rest. I needed that closure. But I had a coworker who had been covering shifts for me while I was in quarantine. So I decided to go to the ER and relieve her. And we were working overnight. That's what happens in the hospital when weather is really bad. You hunker down and you sleep in the hospital. And so they had cots for us, but our power was out. You might have heard about how the power grid in Texas failed and they were doing rolling blackouts. So we were sleeping in frigid temperatures, and we did have generator backup power, but that was only for life-saving devices and a few lights for our patients. And so I think it was the busiest day that we ever had up to that point in the ER. We had, older folks out walking their dogs on the ice and slipping and breaking bones. And anyway, we finally got to bury him 10 days later. And that was huge for me. I needed, that healing. And I just had been feeling so overwhelmed with all of COVID and decided, I needed to kind of step away. I had gotten my master's degree while working nights in 2020. And decided to use that degree in a different role within the same hospital institution. So in April, I stepped away from the bedside to take on a completely different role at a different facility within the same employer, and decided to try something new. And things were going great. I now work with trauma survivors, oddly enough. So these are our patients who have had traumatic incidents, whether it be car accidents, car, motorcycle, falls, gunshot wounds. And I work in supporting those patients and educating our community in how they can prevent being, one of those patients. Things are moving along. I'm building great programs. I feel like life is finally back on track. I'm in a really good place. And then in July, I went in for my annual mammogram, and the radiologist, knowing that I was a nurse, sat me down and said, "Gotta let you know, I'm concerned with what I've seen." And I said, "All right, well, I'm medical, you're medical, give it to me straight." And she said, "I'm concerned." And she just would leave it at that. So knowing I've read radiology reports plenty of times working in the ER, I got access to my report and I read it, and I thought, oh gosh, you've got to be kidding me. And there was that fleeting minute where I wanted to say, why me? And then I thought, no, why not me? 1 in 8 women will receive the diagnosis of breast cancer. So why not me? And I immediately started trying to assemble my team, and I don't work in oncology. So I had as many questions as, you would if it had happened, to you. And in September, I underwent a double mastectomy. And in October, I underwent another surgery because they did not get clear margins. So they had to go back and take more tissue. And tomorrow I have my 3rd surgery, reconstructive surgery, and hopefully that will be the last one. I'm very fortunate. I did not have to undergo chemotherapy this time, and I'm declared cancer-free. And so I'm hoping that things will stay that way, and because I still have a lot of big things to do and a lot of people that I want to help, as a result.
Wow. Wow. I'm so curious to know what is it? Is it your past experiences? Is it your parents? Is there a faith base here? What is it that makes you not say, why me, and instead say, why not me?
It's several of those things that you mentioned. I was born to a teenage mom who divorced very early when I was 1, and she set the example for me. We had our apartment and our cars vandalized, multiple times. And I can only imagine how difficult, it was for her to survive all of those things at that age alone, with a small child. But I never, ever knew that we were suffering. And I never saw her, fall apart. We just carried on. And I will say that there was a period of my life, probably, mostly in high school, where I really doubted myself. I think like most girls do, unfortunately. And I let those insecurities follow me, through most of my adult life. And I'm a deeply, spiritual person. Faith is important to me, but faith doesn't always turn off the anxiety switch. And it doesn't always turn off the depression switch. And it doesn't always cancel out those voices in your head that tell you, I can't do this and I'm not strong enough. And I tell you, when the switch really flipped for me was in March of 2021, after losing my dad and the accident, and being so overwhelmed with my job. And it was kind of a toxic environment, if I'm being honest. And I met up with an old high school friend of mine who happens to be a librarian, and she recommended a book for me. And at the time it was Kristen Hanna's bestseller, The 4 Winds. And if you guys haven't read it yet, I highly recommend it, because Elsa Martinelli, who is the main character, there's a lot of parallels there. And Elsa, as you're reading, it's so obvious to the reader how incredibly strong this woman is. It takes place in Texas, so it was very familiar to me, in the Dust Bowl during the Great Depression. And this woman overcomes and overcomes and overcomes and overcomes and fights for her family and fights for herself, and then ends up fighting for her community. And she doesn't realize how strong she is until she's 40, at the end of the book. And that hit me. I'm just like Elsa. I've been strong this whole time. I just couldn't see that. And it's sad to me that I didn't realize it until I was 50, like her later in life. But at least I've realized it now. And there are so many women who have gone before us, even though Elsa is a fictional character, we look at all the women in the war. Just throughout history, women have persevered and had grit and been resilient. And so that's just what I continue to do. There's no other choice.
You say so many things that resonate so much with us. And this is where Kristen and I always say, you often find your brilliance in the midst of these challenges.
100%.
When you're in those lowest of low places, at that moment, you just get through. You just do what you have to do. You do what you have to do. But if you are lucky and someone tells you, or you do a little bit of work on yourself and look back at what you've experienced, you have that moment where you go, oh my gosh.
Yes.
And so I guess my question to you is, now that you know that, do you embrace that as a part of you? And does it make you, for lack of a better term, braver going forward? Do you, because Kristen and I are both like, okay, we don't want it, but bring it. We'll figure it out. That's where we're at after all this stuff.
For sure. I would be lying if I said I'm looking forward to the next crisis. I mean, I'm not. I'm hoping that 22 is a little bit kinder, because I could use a breath of
break. You could use
a little break. But I will tell you that I 100% believe that growth is really found in the valleys. It's not found in the mountains. And I need a moment on the mountain just so that I can see the beauty and appreciate everything that I went through last year. And I think that being on the mountaintop gives us that opportunity to kind of recharge, so that when we have to go back down into the valley of real life, and we can't escape it, no one escapes it, then we'll be ready. And I like Albert Einstein said that there's only one road to greatness, to human greatness, and it's the road through human suffering.
Agreed.
And I don't think that I would be the strong woman that I am today had I not gone through, trial after trial after trial after trial. And I think it's when we're able to flip that script and to say, this adversity is a blessing, because it's going to take me to the next level. It's going to make me stronger. And I saw my cancer as a blessing the entire way. I learned more in the last 12 months than I've learned in the last 20 years. And for that, I wouldn't trade it for anything.
You know what? You're reminding me of two things that come to mind now when all of these things keep hitting me. And shifting my perspective this way has changed everything for me. One is our friend Chip Baker, who is also from Houston. I'll have to introduce you guys. He says, he even wrote a book titled Grow Through Your Go Through. So if you look at it as an opportunity to grow, it's a whole different perspective on whether you're going to be feeling broken or brilliant, right? And the other mantra that I've had, in especially the past 6 months, has been, this is happening for me, not to me.
Yes, yes.
And looking for that, for the growth that I can have. And then also, you mentioned the mountaintop and recharging. What I used to do was get through the valley, right? Then on the mountaintop, rest, celebrate, all of that, as opposed to now I do that, but I also am, and I'm even more receptive to new tools and new information when I'm in celebration mode, so I can get ready. Because like you said, I know the next one's coming. So now I'm gonna see what else can I gather to be ready for it.
For sure. For sure. I believe that as well. And I have realized that, we have a lot of palm trees down on the coast, in Galveston. And because this is kind of hurricane country, you'll see that a lot of our pine trees break, our oak trees break, but the palm trees never do. And I always try to, that's kind of my mantra, is be the palm tree. Because with every wind, with every storm that comes through, it gets stronger. Roots get stronger. And so that's kind of what I think, when those winds are thrashing, girl, dig your roots in. This is where you're getting stronger. And when you think about, oh my gosh, I don't think if I could take another hit. You say, no, you know what? I can get through this because I got through A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, right?
I think that's exactly the Kristen and I. First of all, you're more evolved than Kristen and I, because we never say our struggles are blessings. We say they sucked. Like they just really sucked. We learned a lot of stuff, but there's a big part of them that just sucked. Like that's, you can't sugarcoat it. But that being said, I think that as you go through these things, you do become more reflective. And as I said, it's not in the moment, because in the moment, you're just like, what do I got to do to get through this? But afterwards, to be able to look back at it and first of all, realize the inherent strength that you have. And then secondly, to kind of take it a step further and look out into the world and go, you know what, there are things out there, like you compare yourself to a palm tree, that kind of lead us along that way if we're willing to see it.
Yes. You have to be willing to reframe. You really do. I've lost my train of thought. I was going to say,
we lose our train of thought all the time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just part of having gone through all this
haven't
stuff.
had enough coffee. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say that any of this was easy, that I had a smile on my face, the whole time. It did suck, it did suck, through it. I think that, learning to be present and learning mindfulness has been huge for me. And especially with the PTSD that comes with trauma, and, receiving a diagnosis of cancer is trauma. We have to focus on the present, because I can't waste today worrying about the next thing that's going to hit. And I did that for a while. And you're right, when you're in it, it's all about survival. It's like, I can do this. I get my team of surgeons. All right, schedule the surgery, take the meds, it's all good. And then afterwards, you have time to reflect and you go, whoa, was that just supposed to be a blip on the radar? Like, how do I just move forward and pretend that didn't happen? And we don't have to pretend that it didn't happen. We can acknowledge it and we can grieve it. But we also, if we want to move forward in a healthy mental way, we have to say, this is what I learned from it. This is what I gained from it. This is why I'm glad it happened, because this is who I am now. And I wouldn't be who I am now if that hadn't happened. So you have to be glad that it happened.
Yeah.
I said, that is very evolved.
Right? We talk about that. The Brilliantly Resilient process is broken into 3 areas, and it's the reset after something happens, and then the rise, moving on, and then uncovering your brilliance. But there's a new R in there that you just mentioned that I'm thinking need to hone in on a little more in the reset, and the rise is the reflect. Because it is pretty amazing when you do reflect back in the 4 points that you just talked about and get the lessons from it to be able to move forward in a new way. I like that. I haven't thought much about the word reflect, but it is a huge piece of the process.
It definitely is. And it is for any, trauma survivor to reflect and acknowledge and to be kind to yourself. to just
I
really,
think that is so huge that you just said that, because you mentioned earlier that for a long time you dealt with the insecurities and I'm not good enough and I'm not going to be enough and all that. And I think we tend to look at those things based on what we think might happen in our lives. But then when we go through these kinds of experiences that you went through and you look back and you do that reflecting, as Kristen and you both just said, that's when you get that moment where you go, holy cow. Like if your best friend had gone through the stuff, you'd just be singing her praises and saying, oh my gosh, do you realize how strong you are? So we do have to take those moments to say that about ourselves,
right.
so that those things that we went through then become skills that we know we have. And as Kristen and I always say, you can transfer them to the next sucker punch, or the next thing that you're going to go through, or maybe build something with those skills that's positive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that, I didn't do this alone. I appreciate all of the comments, that I got on LinkedIn. And, when I shared this, I had about 400 connections. And I thought that maybe a couple of my former, nursing school student or classmates would see it, or a couple of former coworkers. And I had no idea it's been seen by almost 3 million people. And
Wow.
People were saying things that I wasn't comfortable with, calling me a hero, calling me a Wonder Woman. And I thought, no, 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 that you're very kind and I appreciate that, but I'm not worthy of those words. And now that it's been 2 months of all
Girl,
of
you
that,
are. I'm just going to say, yeah, you are.
I think that I've been able to sit back and allow myself to feel like, okay, you did do something here pretty remarkable. But I also have replied in many of these comments and said, yes, I had a hard year, but there were lots of people that had a hard year. And there were a lot of people that had an even harder year. And so, their stories aren't out there. I think it's important for us, one, to realize, we never know what anyone is going through, because people do go through, hit after hit after hit. And some people said, well, don't be afraid, to ask for help. It's okay to not be okay. And I said, oh, trust me, I had to find my tribe. I had to find, my support team. I did get the help, of a therapist. I did have an oncology, social, worker. These weren't skills that just, boom, came out of nowhere. These were coping skills that I've gotten, from books. I mean, this is a great book that I love called, I don't know if you can see I think it's blurring it, but it's Resilience by Eric Greitens. Learning about Eckhart Tolle and the power of the now, and learning to be present. So, I don't want to take credit fully, because I did have, a really good support system. And I think that, anybody has to have that and has to find that.
Well,
But
yeah,
it's
I mean,
just a
that's
sheer
definitely
will
true.
and determination to not fail and to say, this isn't going to be the thing
Yes.
until it is the thing that takes me home. I'm just going to
Yeah.
keep going and keep fighting.
So many of the things that you are saying reflect everything that we talk about in terms of being brilliantly resilient. I mean, when you're hit with that sucker punch, you control the controllables. And very often that does involve when you're involved in something that you have no frame of reference on. I mean, Kristen often says the first blind child she ever met was her son.
Yeah.
I had no idea how to deal with a heroin addict. So for both of us and for you too, it's about controlling the controllables, is realizing you don't have control.
Yep.
So who can I bring into my tribe, which is another thing we talk about that can help me to develop the skill sets that I need. And I would just add one more thing. I think with the idea that, you're not a Wonder Woman, you're not a hero. I think that's a very normal reaction for all of us as women, for every person. I mean, if you have any kind of sense of self-deprecation, you're like, no, that's me.
Yeah.
But I guess, as you said something about flipping the script earlier, I would flip the script and say that we all have the potential to be Wonder Woman. We all have the potential to be heroes in our own lives, the hero of our own story. And very often that has to do with saying, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, so I need help. And then you amass those skills and get through it.
100%. And then I think, you know, for those of us, you know, you with the, you know, the heroin addiction with the blind child, we are not experts on those, but we quickly become expert on those. And then I think it is, again, if you can see it as a blessing, then it's our responsibility to turn around and teach others what we've learned and to support others.
Well, it's like that's the epitome of the hero's journey, right? That you go on your hero's journey, but then to become the guide in someone else's and many other people's hero's journeys, that's the ultimate goal.
Right. We got to pay it forward. And that's how we get through this life.
Agreed.
I would exactly agree. There's so many things that you said to us today that hit on everything that we talk about in living a brilliantly resilient life. And one of the things that we try to do is bring people, our audience and people, the resources that we didn't have. We try to be that ourselves, and we try to bring those people to our audience. And you certainly served as a resource today. So I want to thank you for sharing your story, for being kind enough to come on, especially the day before you have yet another major surgery. Good God, woman. And tell us, if you would, where people can either learn more about you, maybe reach out to you, touch base with you. Where can they find you, Melanie?
So right now, probably the best way is through my LinkedIn account. It's Melanie Bradshaw, and my profile picture right now is a picture of me in scrubs, and I'm kind of flexing because I'm feeling good about surviving cancer. And you know, I'm hoping that you know I can continue to learn, and that I can continue to share, and that I can continue to support. Just trying to you know, build a community right now who is interested in, you know, hearing, you know, the positive messages that I have to bring. And, you know, who knows where that will take. But I have a degree in speech communication outside of my nursing degree, and always wanted to be a motivational speaker. And really quick, I'll tell you a little story. When I was about 30, I had I had the opportunity to listen to a motivational speaker. And when she got done, I went up to her and I said, you know, I want to be a motivational speaker. How do you get into it? And she said, honey, you're too young. You don't have enough experience. You don't have enough stories to tell. And I was really offended at the time and didn't understand what she meant. Now I do.
Now you do.
Now I do. And now I think I have the stories, and I have the messages. And so, you know, God willing, you know, if he provides those opportunities to me, then, you know, I'll get out there and just share.
Love it. I love that you're going to do that, because you do have so much knowledge. And I'm thinking of all of our listeners that are sitting in the pit of, why does all this keep happening? Because that's probably a majority of our audience right now. They are getting hit after hit after hit, and it is just beating them down into broken, and trying to gather resources now for them, for us to give to them, to serve them, to come out of that broken. And you are a phenomenal resource right when we need you. So we'll have to connect you to some folks to help you get out there and share the message with more people.
I'd love that. I thank you so much for having me. And, you know, to those listeners who are in that pit right now, just realize, as hard as it is, that you're going to come out braver and stronger and wiser. And I hope that you take the opportunity, you know, to pay it forward as well.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Melanie. Everybody has the opportunity to come through brilliant, not broken. So thank you so much for joining us today. Everybody check out Melanie, follow her on LinkedIn. She is, as you clearly can tell, an amazing person, and epitomizes what it is like to live a brilliantly resilient life with a brilliantly resilient mindset. And I'm going to turn it over to my buddy who always takes us out.
Listen, thanks so much, Melanie. Make sure everybody goes and checks her out. And if you are still looking for resources to do your own reset, rise, and reveal of your brilliance, go to brilliantlyresilient.net, blink 3 times, and this magic window appears where you just have to put in your email, and then you can get a bit of brilliance from us every week. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Guys.